Thank you, Jim and Paula and everyone at Burt's Bees. Like this has been, you guys, like this organization has changed my little tiny initiative. You know, I was slightly terrified going into the world of Burt's Bees. It was much bigger than I was planning on when I had just launched this thing. But I had an enormous amount of very careful and caring hands help me through a lot of that. And it has only helped my organization grow to something bigger. So I thought I'd first share with you guys, just in case anybody doesn't know, Jim had said I'm hand painting 50,000 individual honeybees in murals all over the world. Most of you have heard this story, but I'll just give you a little recap. I met a little honeybee about 9 years ago on the floor of my apartment in Manhattan, and she was, I noticed she was moving really slowly, and so because she wasn't moving quickly, I actually had a chance to get down on the floor and look really closely as an artist at this little creature. I had no relationship to bees before that whatsoever, and I connected with this little bee. And part of the story that I don't often tell, which applies to today's event in a way, was that I heard this little voice in my head as I was hanging out with this little bee that was where it was, this is just about change. Like something about what was happening with this bee was about change. And so I put the little bee out in the backyard after she died, and I Googled honeybees, and I came across all of the stuff that was going on, the big mystery of colony collapse disorder, and I was like, how come nobody knows about this? Or I didn't know about it anyway. And then I came across a behavior called altruistic suicide, and that's when the bee feels sick if it's in the hive. It will fly off into the abyss for the good of the hive. And that's where the name of the initiative later came from when I started it about 7 years later. So you all know I painted the mural. You've all seen the mural on Burt's Bees. And since that mural, I've painted 4 more in the area. Every experience has just been incredible. What happens when when people come together and I paint bees, and what happens around them is different every time, but it's really kind of amazing. And I also spent a lot of this winter designing and planning, because I've had a lot of interest going forward about places to paint all over the world. And so I suddenly was in this position of not only, it used to be, does anybody want me to paint bees on the wall? And it became, which murals am I going to do? So I had to curate that, and so I'm going to Nebraska. I'm going to be painting in Nebraska in a couple of weeks. I'm painting in Scotland at the end of the summer. I'm going, the Beekeepers Association is bringing me. I'm painting in DC, in LA, in Sydney, in Massachusetts, and then right across from the UN, I'm going to be doing an installation next spring. And it just goes on from there. And so the Burt's Bees mural was all about the swarm. And a lot of what that was about, inspired by, was that swarm of bees that landed on Burt's fence post that launched his initiative, or his idea, or his, the whole thing, because he had prepared. I loved that part of the story, that he had prepared and had the beehives, and then this swarm happened. And it's a behavior that not that many people know the importance of it. It is this healthy expansion of what's going on. And it's funny that mirrored what happened after I painted a swarm, or the idea of the swarm, on the Hill building. My initiative has started to expand. Okay, what did I want to, oh yeah. Yeah, this is where I was going to tie it in. I added this part later. I was like writing in the car as I was on my way here. How is this bold? Well, but one of the things that happens when the bees swarm is that the bees are putting the queen in her most vulnerable state of her life. There's only 2 times she ever leaves the hive. One is to mate, and one is to swarm. And when they're swarming around, it's actually just to create a smokescreen so no bird gets her, no one attacks her. But that is an extremely bold move to have the queen leave the protection of the hive. And it's the same kind of boldness that I want to talk about for a minute, because when Paula asked me to think about what boldness means to me as an artist, I immediately thought of a particular moment when I was 23 years old. I had finished art school. I had a portfolio of green and purple nude figures. Like, I was not prepared for the world at all, you know, but I was like done with art school, and they don't teach you anything in art school, or at least they didn't in my day, but how to make art, you know? They didn't teach you how to make a living at it. None of that had happened yet for me, so I was waiting tables. And I had moved to DC, and when I was standing there one time, I'd been waiting tables about 3 or 4 months, and I was trying to make paintings at night, and I was too tired because I was trying to make enough money to pay the rent, and all of this, something was like wrong in this picture for me. And I remember specifically this one woman walked in the restaurant, and I will never forget her face. It was toward the end of a shift, and I looked at her, and I had this flash in my head that I had a decision to make. I was either going to leave this and just go paint, or I was going to be in my 40s, was what I pictured when I was 23, which was so old. Now I'm 47, and I'm like, that's not old yet. But I was gonna be 40 years old and like not have made my paintings, you know? And that was like, my entire body shook, and I had like a mild panic attack there, because every dream I ever had was being a painter. And it was in that moment where I said, okay, I'm going to change this situation. And I quit that job that night. And this was pre-internet. This was 25 years ago. And I walked out. I went home. And I made a million, like probably 5 or 6 of those flyers you used to see that had all the phone numbers at the bottom. Everyone who's old enough remembers those. You'd rip them off, like I'll walk your dog or whatever it was. But mine all said things like, I will teach your kid to paint. I will paint your hallway. I will paint a little ceiling. I will anything with paint. I'll do a dog portrait. I had one for that. Like, I'll paint a portrait of your kids, everything. And I plastered them all over Washington, D.C. And in 3 days after taking that action, one woman called me and said, I have to meet this guy. I can't go anywhere without seeing these flyers. And she brought me over to her house. I did my first mural, and then I did my second and my third mural for her. And I'll never forget her daughter, who was like 4, watching me paint one day. She says to me, I was just sitting there painting, and she was like, Mommy throws lots of parties, and they're gonna love these paintings. And I was like, perfect, this was it. From that moment, that became a 10-year client, and then I was working for the Washington Wizards painting. I was their in-house muralist. It just, word of mouth, happened. But it was that bold action of just saying, okay, this isn't working for me, I need to change that changed everything for me. It changed the direction of my career. The second bold action that came to mind when Paula asked me to talk about this was launching this initiative. It happened very organically. It was 9 years, and then 7 years later, I had made a few paintings of bees, but there was a friend of mine sent me an iPhone video of a big wall on a honey company in Central Florida. It was kind of in the middle of nowhere, Florida. It wasn't like in Orlando or on a beach or something. It was just in the middle, La Belle. And she said, you should ask these people if they want bees on their wall. And I was like, maybe I should. I've been painting. I wanted to do one eventually. So I called them up, and they said, we would love to have bees on our wall, but murals are illegal in the town, and we have no money, and no one in the town has any money, so you're not going to get any money. And I was like, okay, I'm not going to run from the cops. So if you can get the law changed, I'll just figure it out. I'll figure it out how to do this. And this was a big wall. You guys have seen me paint. It's not quick. I don't zip in a couple of days and then I'm out, So this was 10 weeks I was committing to this, And so they got the law changed. 2 months later, they called me and they're like, okay, we're ready for our bees. I'm like, oh my gosh, I guess I better go do this. And I raised like a few $100s for gas money, and I went. And when I got there, someone put me up in their RV for free. With a coffee shop in town would not let me pay for a cup of coffee or a breakfast ever. And restaurants in town started giving me free food, and people started donating little bits of money. And what blew me away more than anything was other honey companies, 2 or 3 of them in other parts of the country, donated money for me to paint bees on another honey company's wall. And I thought, where in the world would you ever see that? There was like this thing that transcended business. It transcended any of that. It was totally about the human spirit, and people were connecting with the bees, and it was just awesome, And so I was like, okay, here I am. I got to do something about this. So I said, I'm going to go and turn this. It was a conversation about the number of bees in a healthy, thriving hive. The number 50,000 came up, and I said, I'm going to try and do this. And that leap changed everything for me in the past couple of years. It wasn't because there was something ahead of me that said I can automatically do this. I ran a failed Kickstarter campaign, took 8 months of like working at this 40 hours a week and not making any money, 10 weeks of not really, I mean, we did make a little money on the LaBelle job, but it was the process of the bold leap that got me there, you know? And I had never really thought about it like that because art is always filled with risks. It just always is, because you're bringing something that wasn't there into the world, you know, and so you never know what's going to happen when you're creating something new. It's not just making it or trying to survive at it. There's risk in just looking at it because it has the power to change us simply by witnessing it. You guys spent the day looking at artwork today. I've spent my life looking at artwork. And every time I like really open up to looking at a piece of artwork, I open myself up to the possibility of change. And then I know what that feels like to be touched in a different way. And I get that experience. That's so much of what it's about. I got this text yesterday. I kept adding little notes into my things here. But I'm doing a mural in DC in the fall. And so I went ahead. It's at an elementary school. And I had an amazing experience when I was there, because I just went to paint one scout bee. I'm doing the mural in the fall, so I was like, let me just generate a little excitement with the kids. And I tried to do it like secretly. That was the plan, to do it after school when no one was there. And then they were going to come in and discover it the next day. Our, great plans never work out that way. There was after school until 7 p.m. So I was like, okay, we're just going to go for it. It was actually, the playground was full, the opposite. And so I was like, okay, I guess we're just doing this. And I started painting, and like a swarm of these little kids were like right here. I could feel them breathing on my neck as I'm trying to paint this bee. And then they're like looking at my paint cups. You guys have seen my paint cups. They were just like all up in me. And I loved it. It was like the excitement. I got to interact with them, and it was so cool. And then I got a text yesterday from one of the teachers at the school that said, she said, I overheard a little kid as he was dragging his mom the next day through the hallway, and he was saying, Mom, come on, we can't go home yet. I gotta go check on the bee. And I was like, my master plan is working. Just getting them thinking about the bees. They don't have to know all of what we know about what's going on with them. They just have to connect with them and find some importance in a painted bee, and then find some importance in a bee that's in their yard. I mean, that's the simplicity of the entire initiative. Said that. Okay, this is like, I've only got a couple of more little things and then I'm done. But I'm sort of obsessed with this quote right now by Kurt Lewin, so I thought I would share it with you guys because it kind of applies today. He's one of the fathers of modern social psychology. And it's, if you truly want to understand something, try to change it. And that, I've been meditating and obsessing on that quote for a long time. And I've learned through this work that if I truly want to understand myself and what I'm capable of, I have to try to change me, and because I don't know how big this initiative needs to grow to be exactly what it's supposed to be. Making a piece of artwork, we learned this in art school, the mastery of being any kind of artist is knowing when it's done. And in art school, we kill 1,000 pieces of artwork trying to figure out when a piece is done. And so I don't know when this piece that I'm creating will be done. So it's just being open enough to change myself for it. And that brought me to the moment that I changed more than anything was because of you guys last year. When I and Paula held my hand gently through the process of letting over 300 people touch my piece of artwork on a historical building, which I did not want to do. I think flat out no was what I told her when she was like, maybe we should do this. But the beauty of that, I mean, talk about bold, right? I was like, okay, there's some bold. But if I hadn't risked that, I wouldn't have known what it felt like to have you guys painting and watching you guys engage with this work that I'm doing. Up until that moment, I had been looking at it as an initiative of me painting 50,000 bees. I hadn't been looking at it as me inviting people into this process. I had no training in that. My past was me painting things and people looking at it. So by allowing you guys to come in such a big, it wasn't two little kids somewhere, it was too big to not notice, it changed my initiative for the better. And now I've had firemen or firefighters up on a wall painting, I've had kids painting, and I'm bringing it into the initiative in a bigger way to get as many people as possible to paint with me. And the last thing I wanted to say was, everyone knows we can never really change anyone but ourselves. But when we change ourselves and when a whole bunch of people change together, things do change around us. So with that, I just want to thank everybody.